So in fact, the economic proposition is already very strong without needing the extra incentive of a renewable energy certificate. On that, just in terms of the issue of the RECs for and under the renewable energy target for electricity, I just wanted to clarify that the Greens' position is that we still support the use of RECs for wood where that wood is sourced from plantations, and that the debate last year was all about the use of RECs under the renewable energy target where that wood was coming from native forest sources.
You can elaborate on that in two more questions, but thank you very much. Janet. Okay, footy score, anyone? All right, there's still hope. 6-4. Okay, well there you go. It's not a blowout yet. No, we're just sort of moved through the list as we've got, I'm afraid. Strengthening anti-dumping system was the other question of the big 9 that we have agreed with our panel that will be asked this evening. And Dave Gover from EWPAA should be in the room to talk us through this one.
Yeah, good evening, Dave Gover from the Engineered Wood Products Association. This question relates to international trade. So our timber markets are exposed to, but it's not a level playing field for our industry. We have seen a number of instances of product dumping in our markets, and we've seen a number of instances of non-conforming products. A strong and effective anti-dumping system and a product conformity system is important to keep the balance. So the question is this: will you continue to strengthen the anti-dumping system and non-conforming product policy, both major issues for our industry?
Joel, I believe we're up to you as the starting.
Yeah, it's an ongoing piece of work. Of course, we're a small island trading nation, and trade is critical to the strength of our economy. And whatever we do, we need to be consistent with our international trading obligations and the deals in which we enter. And we try very hard to do so because it's so important to us. Labor, when last in office, established a new anti-dumping authority. I think it's maturing. I think there's always more to do. There are always challenges in what is a very, very complex area of public policy. But we are absolutely committed to doing all we can to ensure that Australian manufacturers and growers, producers, Australian industry more generally, are not disadvantaged by the anti-dumping antics of other nation states. We're in a difficult, being in Asia brings many advantages, but it brings a few disadvantages as well. And people don't always play to the same rules that we play to or are expected to play to, and it's a tough area of public policy. But we are absolutely committed to doing everything in the power of the Commonwealth, if in government, to protect our local sectors from those doing the wrong thing and dumping into our markets.
Thanks very much, Joel. Janet.
I think I could be really short and say absolutely, yes. And it's obviously a critical issue, and it's something that it's just not fair on our producers here to be competing against products that are being subsidised and being dumped onto our markets. And you can't expect producers here to be competing against that. So dealing with it is incredibly important. And relatedly, I think consumers knowing where their wood's coming from, and particularly having really strong certification systems is also relatedly really important. And we want to see those strong, rigorous certification systems in place too, so people really can trust that the wood product that they're buying, they know has been produced in an environmentally sustainable way.
Thanks. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, look, I've been on record a million times as saying that I think that coming up with the fairest trading system for Australian businesses is something that is a fundamental role of government. Certainly, this is a work in progress, and we need to continually be ever vigilant about ensuring that we have got the best, tightest and strongest anti-dumping and non-conforming product regulations and legislation in place. And I acknowledge that the Anti-Dumping Commission is a great initiative. It is an independent body, so unfortunately, even when we don't necessarily like the result that comes or the determination of the Anti-Dumping Commission, we've made it independent, so therefore we have to accept the umpire's decision. But yeah, I think it is absolutely one of the most fundamental parts of ensuring a strong industry, but as Joel rightly points out, it's a very fine line. We're a very small country. We've got 22 million people. We're a trading nation. We're never going to get rich selling to ourselves. So we also need to be mindful in our relationship with our trading partners that we don't damage that relationship for your exports in the process of being overzealous on protecting your imports. It's a very, very fine line to walk, but certainly, it is something that we must constantly be vigilant over.
Wow, there's not much result there. I said, all of them. It seems like that we had to restart the system. It'll take a while to come through. As I say, it's just a feedback mechanism, so I'm not going to slow down the evening too much on the basis of it. This, though, was the question Janet started to answer a couple ago, and it is one of our big policy areas, a big policy question for us about native forest wood waste renewable energy credits. Steve Dadd is here somewhere from Boral who's going to ask this question. Thanks, Steve.
Steve Dadd, and I run Boral's Timber Division, and we
Just hold the mic close to your mouth.
We draw our resource from both plantation and also sustainable native forest, so it's quite relevant to us. Last year, our industry applauded a very sensible government decision to again recognise wood waste sourced from sustainably managed native forest as eligible for renewable energy credits as part of the RET. My question to the panel, perhaps two-thirds of the panel, is will you continue to support wood waste sourced from sustainably managed native forests as the eligible source of fibre for renewable bioenergy under the RET?
Janet, is your turn first.
My turn first, and I think everyone knows what I'm going to say. I've got a big red cross on your score sheet for this. It's very clear from our position is no, that because we don't believe that the logging that is going on in our native forests in fact is sustainable management of our native forests, and that believe that we need to be removing that incredibly environmentally destructive operations in our forests, and that's where we come from. And I know there'll be many in the room who will disagree with me on that, but that's a very strong, and we feel very strongly backed by the science, that the damage to our native forests by ongoing intensive logging is too damaging, and that we don't need to do it anymore because we've got plantations that are now 85% of the industry. So as such, we want to be seeing that rapid transition of logging out of native forests, and do not believe, and essentially once you're doing that, the wood waste is no longer there. There's the potential, as during the debate, as about the RECs from native forests, of having them, just like wood chipping has dominated the native forest industry over the last 30 years for the production of wood for burning for energy, to dominate forestry in native forests. And we don't think that's a quality way to be treating our native forests. So, as I said in my previous statement, when it comes to RECs for waste from wood from plantation operations, yes, we will support that. But in the context of protecting our forests, RECs from native forest wood burning, no.
All right. Anne, over to you.
Do I get to answer that one?
Well, not you answer the question asked from the floor. Is that what you? Yes.
No, just in the sense of, obviously we do support the sustainable logging of the small amount of native forest that's currently being logged in Australia, and therefore we support making sure that we make maximum use of all components of that particular forestry operation. So we are absolutely supportive of.
Thanks, Anne. Joel.
Thanks, Russ. Well, unlike Janet and the Greens, Labor does believe that our native forests are being sustainably managed. We are committed to the RFA process, and we support it as the ongoing underpinning of the way we manage those forests. But I've answered the question. Labor won't be accommodating native waste within the RET.
Do you want to elaborate at all on that?
I thought I did.
Yeah, I think what was happening there, though, it wasn't your fault, probably the way we had asked the question, that we were confusing the issue of the thermal heat recognition in the RET with the native forest wood waste. So perhaps, yes.
We were too.
So on this one.
Well, the RET is a busy space.
It
and
is,
renewable
yep.
energy certificates are highly competed for. And we see the renewable energy target, and before that the mandatory renewable energy target, as a means of promoting those sources of energy that are infinitely renewable: solar, wind, tidal, and so on. And we don't see, sorry, I know people disagree, and we're not all here to agree. Some people are backing Queensland, some people are backing New South Wales. Some South Australians don't know who to back because they don't know anything about the game. Anne looked at me starry-eyed and innocently and said, "You guys never win, do you?" I'm sure it was a genuine question. I said, "We win, but we just don't often win the series." But that's our position, and I know people here don't appreciate it all that much, but it is what it is, and we'll reserve that competitive space within the RET for infinitely renewable sources of energy. And, you know, and sadly for you, maybe, we don't see native waste being part of that mix.
Plantation waste, though.
Plantation's okay.
Okay, look, thanks very much for that. And Senator Ann Ruston's got 83% there. Don't think you'll be surprised, Joel, to see yourself on 4 or so. And Senator Rice, you're on 6%. More information needed from 4%.
Can we ask if any of those 4% are in the room? Are they prepared to put their hand up?
No, you can't. It's supposed to be. People are either checking footy scores or voting. That's kind of useful that State of Origin's on for people's confidentiality. We've got a bit more to get through tonight, and our team have been enormously generous and an incredibly busy campaign to spend this time with us. We have farm forestry next to talk about. Kevin Harding's our questioner. Thanks very much, Kevin. Introduce yourself.
Good, thanks, Ross. Currently the President of Australian Forest Growers, which is our national body representing private forest growers and I guess farm forestry by default there. Question is, sort of over many years, Australian farmers and foresters have established small-scale planted forests for wood production and other commercial purposes that also produce a range of other benefits such as soil and water conservation, salinity control, shade and shelter for stock, etc. The diversity that these small private forest plantings add to rural enterprises provides economic resilience against drought and fluctuating stock and crop prices. They also have the great potential to add to the supply chain that we've mentioned before is sadly lacking and is not increasing. However, Australia has failed to recognise or achieve the full potential of our farm forestry sector. So the key question is, how will you support farm forestry reaching this significant potential?
Thanks, Kevin. I think it was Joel, wasn't it? Next up.
No, it's me.
Okay. Sorry, Anne. I've lost track.
All right, should we toss it down? The three-sided coin?
No, yes, one and Anne go off on this
Okay.
one. Thank you.
Well, look, Kevin, I've got to say I'm a huge supporter of farm forestry for a whole heap of reasons. One is that obviously we need to look at every possible tool or mechanism that we can increase the amount of the estate that we've got available for forestry. And so if farmers want to use this as one of the tools, then it's a great benefit to forestry. Equally, it's of huge benefit to our farmers because it gives them the opportunity to be able to diversify away from more traditional means of income. It gives them a long-term opportunity for investment in their own product, which they've got, or in their own farm, which they've got some control over. The other thing too is that, you know, one of the great challenges that we have, and we all know it in this room, is to be able to attract enough capital that we can get the investment back into this industry so that you have got that reliable ongoing security of resource that Joel mentioned in his first comments. So, you know, Australia's not renowned for its patient capital. We make an investment, we expect to get $1 back tomorrow. So I think that there is a huge scope and opportunity for us to be looking at ways that we can put some incentives into the marketplace for farm forestry, because whilst it will never be the lion's share of the forestry industry, I think it will be a very important component of forestry. But as you rightly point out, it equally has such amazing opportunities for our farming sector. So, yeah, I'm absolutely supportive of it and will be very keen to talk about the opportunities of developing it. And I also think it plays in very much into your hub model that Ross has put forward, that if we can put some incentives in place, particularly for farmers that live within areas where the infrastructure is being sort of incentivised to occur, then obviously the opportunity is even greater. So, yep, I'm a big farm forestry fan.
Thanks. Joel?
I'm a fan too, Ross.
It's a... You've got to add a bit more, probably.
It's a bit like R&D, isn't it? Everyone loves the idea, and it brings great environmental benefits, additional sources of income for farmers, best land management practices, etc. I wish I'd got around to talking to Brent Finlay about this, because sometimes it pops into my head and I wonder whether this is partly cultural for farmers. I'm seeing whether Brent is nodding or shaking his head. I think he's nodding his head. So I think this is we need a cultural approach to this. Obviously, we need to attract the investment, but and some education. I know there is an education foundation, isn't there, on farm forestry, a not-for-profit group that helps farmers to learn the practices of plantations and trees on their properties. So yeah, we're all great fans, I'm sure. And I don't have a great contribution to make tonight, but my instinct is that we need to deal with some of those cultural issues, and we need to roll out some further opportunities for farmers to better understand the benefits, and through education, give them the support they need to better understand it and to become part of the process.
Thanks. Janet?
Well, we're big fans too, for all the reasons that have been outlined both in the question and the responses from Anne and Joel. And in fact, see farm forestry as being a really critical part of our wood production in Australia. The ask from AFPA, as I understand it, was that for $3 million of seed funding, which should be allocated for the establishment of a national farm forestry cooperative for farmers. And I presume, given that was the ask that we were being asked, that is the key thing that people involved in farm forestry feel is where that money should be best spent. And I'm very pleased to say, yes, the Greens would commit that $3 million for establishing a national farm forestry cooperative.
Well, there you go. Well, Janet Wright's just got 100% from from a small number of participants, but well done on
Should we be putting that funding commitment to the Parliamentary Budget Office like the rest of us do, Russ?
Yeah. I should add that when you have a look, as I know all of you will, including folks online, at the policy page tomorrow on the AFPA Build the Vote website, you won't necessarily see these answers reflected very quickly. The way we'll be managing that is really, as we get close to the real pointy end of the campaign, making our own value judgments, and we admit that, and we say that on the website, about the colour that's going to appear there for parties, because Joel's making a good point that there are things you can say in these spaces which are encouraging, but there's also, in our view, there are actual policy announcements and actually money that is delivered or promised, and they're the sort of things that you'll get a green tick for. You might just get an amber if you're just saying the right things, but we haven't seen anything that's going to deliver any opportunity. So in that particular case, the Greens on farm forestry with an announcement like that will get a green tick in our scorecard, as you'd expect.
Can I just add something in
Yes.
the hope of just getting an extra point or two?
Go ahead.
But also just to make the point that last week Barnaby did make a $520,000 commitment into coming up with some tools to work with farmers about developing ways in which they could maximise their opportunity for farm forestry. And one would hope that from working through that, we'd be able to get a better understanding of what farmers wanted in terms of those tools to develop. That actually came from the R&D for Profit Fund.
Thank you very much, all of you, and we're working through the questions, as you know, that we want to get through before we've had a commitment that we would let them out by 9:30, because it is a very busy period in their lives, as you know. Ruth Harvey is over from WA, and Ruth is up the back here.
At the back here.
Bushfires and mechanical fuel reduction.
Yes. My state of Western Australia has experienced several devastating bushfires in recent years. Studies and industry experience have shown that mechanically removing biomass fuel from forested areas, combined with prescribed burning, can reduce the incidence and degree of devastation caused by bushfire. So do you support a long-term bushfire mitigation strategy, which includes funding to expand the existing trials of mechanical fuel reduction?
Thank so, and I'm sure that's now, Joel, yours first. Did you hear all that properly from Ruth?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. It's a bit like R&D and tree farming. Everyone supports hazard reduction and raking through the forest. It sounds like a good plan. It's part of Rob's report today. The only problem is he wants $300 million over 10 years, and that's not a small amount of money. Look, it's obviously, first and foremost, a state issue, a state responsibility. Most of those fires take place, on Crown land and in, my God, what do we call them? National parks. Therefore, gee, it's a bit of a blue not remembering national parks. Again, first and foremost, a state responsibility. But we all know about the problems of vertical fiscal imbalance. That is, the Commonwealth's the main holder of the money, and the states are increasingly starved of money. Colin Barnett, in particular, has a view about that and GST distribution. So obviously, and to get over those federation issues, we need some uniformity in our approach. And obviously, the Commonwealth has a role to play. We'll have a look at the recommendations, but again, $300 million is not a small amount of money, and I'm in no position, unlike the Greens. You could probably make a commitment, Jeanette. $300 million tonight. No? Okay. Yeah. So there's a limit, is there? You can pull money out of the hat, but is it a $100 million limit or? Okay. So obviously it's a very serious issue, all those jokes aside. It's a hazard to human health, it's a hazard to our environment. Burn-offs, of course, were in the news in New South Wales only last week because of the environmental impact they were having. We've obviously got a better method, but it's not an inexpensive method. And I think we'll only get there if the Commonwealth and the states work together.
Just to round that one out, though, Joel, it sounds like philosophically, though, the ALP has no difficulty with this as an idea that you might add machinery to matches in terms of reducing the fuel load.
No, of course not.
Thank you. Janet?
Fire management, I think, is going to be the biggest issue that we're facing in our natural environment. Well, no, there are lots of them, but particularly the issue of fire management under a warming climate is massive in terms of increasing frequency, extent, severity of fire. And so I think we need to have a lot of focus on how we manage fire and how we deal with it. And obviously for you in the room with the business in growing wood, that's a critical thing. Whether mechanical fuel reduction is how much of that is part of that fire management, I think is still very much up in the air. And that the study that has been quoted so far has got, as I understand it, no evidence in an Australian context as to what the impact on the ecological impacts and the effectiveness of that are in Australia. And I noted that in the description of it, it was mechanical fuel reduction plus prescribed burning. So it's not that we're going to be not burning. So I think the jury is well and truly still out. But look, I know that there's a pilot study going on. I'll be very interested to see the results that come from that research.
Thanks, Janet. Anne?
Well, obviously, we do support the research into the possibility of using mechanical fuel reduction as one of the tools by which we can deal with fire. Obviously, we've made an investment in a trial, so we're going to wait to see what those trials come back with before we make any further decisions. I know when I went back after the draft report came out and it had $300 million over 10 years, it was the thing that I think the Treasurer nearly choked on his Wheaties over. It's like, what do you mean that you're actually supporting this particular report and it's got $300 million in it? But the reality is the cost of the damage and the impacts of fires and the increasing cost to our communities is escalating, and $300 million would probably seem like a very small amount of money if you actually look at it in the context of how much the fires are costing the Australian community across the board. Rightly, I think the role of how we deal with this is not just vested in the Commonwealth. It certainly is vested in all of us. It's invested in the states, and it's also invested in our communities to make sure that we all work together to try and work out how best we can reduce the extraordinary costs, not just financially, but loss of life, loss of stock, pain and suffering that occur with bushfires. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the results of this mechanical reduction trial bring back. And I certainly think that it's one of the areas that and it's not just a forestry area, it's not just an agricultural area. This is an issue that has to be dealt with more broadly across many different sectors at many different levels of government and community. So absolutely supportive and looking forward to seeing what opportunities that we can be and being innovative about how we deal with fire mitigation instead of just doing the same old, same old.
Thank you all very much. We're closing in on our last question now at the very important issue of RFAs, and Terry from Tasmania is in the room. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks.
The regional forest agreements, of course, have been a substantive underpinning platform for particularly native forestry, but also a number of other social issues that arise in our forests, particularly things like beekeeping, tourism and the like. And we would be interested to know whether or not the three parties are going to make a commitment to work with their state counterparts to roll over the regional forest agreements, but not only to roll over, because I think you've all answered that in a way already tonight, so Ross has given me a bit of a bummer of a question. But if I could change it just a fraction and say not only roll it over for 20 years, but make it a rolling 20-year agreement into the future, so that we don't face this ever-diminishing period of security of supply, which is an issue I think you've spoken about, Joel. And Anne, I acknowledge the commitment made yesterday by the Coalition, but it wasn't for rolling 20-year periods, only a rollover for 20 years. And I wonder if you'd be keen to extend that, and I know Janet's going to be really keen to give us a positive answer to this question.
She's certainly going to be keen to give us an answer.
I think I get to start, don't I?
By all means.
And I know that I haven't got a lot of support in this room, but no, the Greens don't believe that the regional forest agreements have failed in their aims. They have failed to be protecting our forest environment, and they have failed to protect the number of jobs in the industry. We feel that now is the time to be getting the conflict out of our forestry industries, as I've been saying, and we need to be shifting the industry 100% to plantations. We believe that the regional forest agreements therefore should end, and that we should be managing our forests for the other values of our forests, the non-wood production values, for wildlife, for water, for recreation and tourism, and for carbon, and that these are not compatible with ongoing intensive logging of our native forests. And I think the other interesting thing in terms of this position is looking at, we've got those values, but if you look at it from a purely economic perspective, there's been recent research that's been done on the Central Highlands forests in Victoria, analysing using the UN ecological accounting framework as to what the value of our forests economically is for those different uses, where wood production per hectare per year is using that UN framework is valued at around about $40 per hectare per year. For water, it's $800. For tourism and recreation, it's $1,500. And if you value carbon at the value of carbon that's under the last auction in the Emissions Reduction Fund of $12 per tonne, it's over $60 per hectare per year. So we think that it is very clear that both on the whole range of values and the economic values that the case is very strong, that we should be protecting our forests for those values, and that we're in a situation where we don't need to continue this conflict, because for as long as intensive wood production continues in our native forest, there is going to be continued conflict, and the social licence isn't there. We can be moving the industry into the 21st century by shifting it to plantations.
Thanks, Janet. Anne?
I've got to say, I find it quite interesting to be lectured on an economic argument of a shared resource by the Greens, but there you go. Look, can I say I don't agree. I don't agree with what Janet just said, in the sense that I don't believe that our RFAs have failed. I think that our RFAs, it's a very long period of time, 20 years. Of course things are going to change over that period of time. Of course there are going to be things when you do a review that you can see that you could have done better. It may have been because you haven't done them as well as you should have in the first place, or it might just be that things have changed over that period of time. I have to say I hadn't actually given any thought about them being rolling 20 years as opposed to rolling them over after 20 years. So my comments yesterday weren't anything about saying that I didn't support a rolling 20-year RFA. It's just that it's not something that I'd given any great thought to. So I would say that, the importance of these RFAs, particularly to our forestry industry, because of the security that it allows people for the security and knowing the supply of resource are absolutely fundamental. I have not heard anybody, even the independent reviewers, come back and say that they believe that the RFAs have failed. They have certainly given some constructive criticisms about things that we could do better, and I'm quite happy to accept that. We are absolutely committed to the continuation of RFAs. In fact, we would have been had our first RFA signed had the election been held at the time that it was expected later this year, because we're in the final stages of finalising the Tasmanian RFA for it to be rolled over for another 20 years. And we're also well underway with all of the other RFAs in the other states of Australia. So we are absolutely committed to it. We don't believe they've failed. We believe they're a valuable tool and they're absolutely essential to your future.
Joel, this is the last answer of the evening. I'm
Why
sure
does
it's going to be a
Why does
doozy.
everything take so long, Anne, with your government, with those reviews?
Because we do them properly.
RFAs, Joel.
Terry, I know you people in the Deep South have no interest in the state of origin, but I do, so I can be pretty brief, I think. Labor supports the RFAs, and we support them on a continuing basis. We have very strong ownership of them, of course. Rolling 20 years, Terry, come on. I mean, do I have any credibility as a politician if I'm going to make promises for my colleagues in 30 years, 40 years' time, 60 years' time? I'm not so sure. Not like Anne's not been put to me before, but we have ownership of the RFAs. They're not perfect, but they are the foundation of our system, and they provide investment certainty, and we support them on an ongoing basis. Can I just say very briefly that this is not my first stint in forestry. I was in forestry way back. I've been in the parliament 20 years. I know I don't look that old, but it's true. And I'm so very pleased that this time around, I was the minister for a short time, of course, this time around, it's not about the forestry wars. We've settled the forestry wars. The RFAs provided the foundation to settle those forestry wars, and thankfully this time around we talk more about moving up that value curve, about our future profitability, and that's exactly where we should continue to have the conversation.
Thank you very much, Joel. And lift the applause, because that's the close of the question and answer session, so we are very grateful. And we really are enormously grateful. It's a very busy time and a very important evening for some people who are footy tragics, but it was very important, and we appreciated too that the dialogue there and the way that our political leaders took on the opportunity to actually address head-on the questions that we'd formulated. I know that not all the questions that everyone in the room would have had or online, and we apologise for that, but the opportunity was there to get to, we only had till 9:30, and we figured it would take about this long, and it was correct and right thing to do to give our political leaders here a chance to engage with each one of those questions and to give us their best answer at this point in the campaign. I'm not going to give up on a couple of them where I don't think we got the right answer, but we'll see how we go. There's still a bit of running left in the ball. I'm going to invite Greg just to say thank you, but before he does, I wanted to point out that we're giving our guests a couple of little gifts here tonight. Traditional hardwood pen, but also this pen. We don't normally give our guests just a little plastic pen out of the cupboard, but you'll be most interested to know that we ordered these online because they've got cellulose nanofibre in the ink. So there you go, just something to think about. So you're getting those two gifts tonight, and I'll invite our chair, Greg McCormack, to say thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks very much, Ross. I think we've all enjoyed greatly the debate tonight and your forthright and straightforward answers in, I think, all cases, and we really appreciate that. We mightn't agree with all the answers, but we really appreciate you giving us your time and answering the questions as well as you did. So on behalf of all of us, we'd like to present you with these pens, and thank you very much for your attendance, and if everybody could just give some round of applause for... That's
That's Anne's. stand here before you race off. Thanks, everyone. Have a drink. Yeah.
Now you're acting very strange. The hands I used to touch don't even wave hello. Oh, I miss your lips. You'll never know.
If you would only turn to me, speak my name just once more, you might find right there and then
Strangers can be